Welcome to a panel on alternative proteins. So we are going to talk about two specific areas. For once, the regulation, and the second topic will be consumer acceptance. We have a wonderful panel here, and to jump right into it, let's have a round of introductions, 1 to 2 minutes each. Let's start with Janesh. Can you talk a bit about your connection to alternative proteins?
Hey, y'all. Thank you for having me on the panel today. Excited to be alongside such a wonderful set of people. My relationship with alternative proteins actually indirectly began as a kid. I grew up with Jainism as a religion, where animal welfare very much is at the core and center, nonviolence as well. But really, my interest in the industry started after I had 2 other careers, one on Wall Street for 5 to 6 years with companies like Morgan Stanley and Goldman Sachs, and then in Silicon Valley with companies such as Microsoft and Yammer and a host of startups. And about 7.5 years ago, when I turned plant-based after a lot of questioning life, I started taking more interest in the industry. Eventually led me to trying to find my way to try to make that my career. I learned a lot more beyond animal welfare as to why this industry really matters, and that related to sustainability and all the other impacts of animal agriculture and animal husbandry, the biggest impact in climate, biodiversity loss, food hunger, biggest cause behind pandemics, the list goes on. And so as a result of that, I jumped in and tried to find a job, eventually gave up on trying to find a job after mapping out the whole industry. And around 2013 to 17 is when I sort of did that piece. And then in 2017, after a few experiments, launched a company called Milk Guys, Milk with a Y. This was a vegan e-commerce platform or a plant-based e-commerce platform. We had the largest selection of plant-based alternatives to seafood, poultry, dairy, and meat on one platform. And we started delivering this in San Francisco, quickly in the San Francisco Bay Area. And then within the first 10 months, we went through YC, raised $2.5 million in funding, and went national in the lower 48 states of the United States. Post this, I've consulted directly with the founders and executives at Just on expanding the liquid egg into Asia. And in 2019, because of family reasons, I moved back to India. And it was always a dream to sort of help build an ecosystem in India and Asia. And during that time, I've served in the advisory board of a few startups here. I served as a partner at a company called vegandukan.com. I consulted with Good Dot, which is the Beyond Meat of India. Served in a short, pro bono stint with the Good Food Institute India. Helped a slew of different startups here that are like the Soylent of India, or the first plant-based protein shake in a bottle here. And serve as an advisor to a company called Pro Meat, which is trying to use electrospinning to create plant-based chicken. And yeah, just continue to do a host of things in the space because this is basically my life mission, and I'm really happy that it is now also my career.
Thank you very much for your introduction, Janesh. Vin, would you like to continue with a short introduction of yourself?
Sure. Thank you, Melinda. Thanks for the opportunity to take part in the event. I'm Vin. I'm the founder and CEO of Gaia Foods. We are a Singapore-based cultivated red meat company, and we are the first one in Southeast Asia to focus on red meat. If you look at the overall cultured meat ecosystem, Asia is responsible for almost 40% of the red meat consumed across the world. But when you look at the option for Asians, there are hardly any to none. So that's when we saw the opportunity, and we thought our experience in our stem cell biology field as scientists previously, we can significantly contribute to accelerate the way in which we can bring the cultivated meat to the market. So we are actually based in Singapore, and this gives us a unique advantage because Singapore government is pretty open about understanding and accepting a new kind of food and alternate protein sector, and that is reminded by the fact that Singapore became the first in the world to allow the use of sale of cultivated meat in the world. So this kind of gives a very interesting advantage and hope for us to design and develop product for conscious Asian consumers and kind of give a real meat option for people in this region. And we'll go ahead and talk later. Thanks for the time.
Thank you, Vin. Jerry, would you like to continue?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jerry Gomez. I've been in the consumer sector for most of my career. First half of it has been more on big boxes like retail and also with Burger King in restaurants. The second half has been more in middle market assets, specifically within CPG, plant-based foods, and also restaurants. Most notably, now the last roughly 3 years, I've been involved with plant-based. Started with the implementation of Just into the last global restaurant chain that I ran. And the last 2 years, I've been heavily involved with specifically plant-based brands. One in Europe, where I was a board member and also the head of strategy. And in the last 8 months, we've been developing on a new business that will be launching in the next few months, also within the plant-based space. But like many of you, I have a passion for the ecosystem and understand that it is not simply a trend or a mega trend, is simply a movement and a way of life. So excited to be part of this transition away from animal protein in some regards, and also and how we can impact the greater ecosystem. So thank you. Glad to be here, everyone.
Thank you, Jerry. Eugene, you're the next.
Yep. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, no matter where you are in the world. My name is Eugene Wang. I'm the co-founder and CEO of a company called Selfies Bionutrients. I spent my whole career pretty much in making plant meat. I was born and grew up in Taiwan, by the way. 4th generation Buddhism in my family, and 3rd generation making vegetarian food. Spent 5 years in the factory. I can tell you down to the exact ingredients how to make that plant-based chicken nuggets or plant-based burger. So about 12 years ago, I found out my daughter Selfie is allergic to seafood, especially shellfish. So I started a company back in 2010 in Sebastopol, California, called Selfie's Kitchen. Our products are actually carried by Milk Guys, by the way, Janesh. And so, during the last 10 years or so, when I was running that business, got a lot of consumers asking, can you make your plant-based seafood having identical or equivalent nutritional value like the real seafood? And that's how got me into this micro-fermentation, especially microalgae fermentation research. And I was invited by Singapore government to come here to pitch and immediately won my grant. So we then settled our project right here. And that's how we ended up right here. And that pretty much spells my whole journey in this plant-based world.
Thank you, Eugene. And last but not least, Rob.
Thanks, Marina, for having me. I'm Rob Bloom. I'm the co-founder and CEO of the Leaf Protein Company. I'm an engineer turned finance investor turned entrepreneur. And last year, with my co-founder Fern Ho, we co-founded the Leaf Protein Company with the very ambitious goal to disrupt the plant protein market, particularly soybeans, with leaf proteins, which are the most abundant protein on our planet. But they're not consumed by humans because they contain too much fiber. So we started researching, and this is what basically created our product, a protein powder extracted from the leaves of Parasca eculeata, a plant from Brazil. So in short, this is my story. In private equity, I was in foods and agriculture in Latin America, and then most recently co-founded the Leaf Protein Company.
Wonderful. Good to have you. Thank you, Rob. So shortly about me, I'm Marina Schmidt. I'm the founder of Red to Green. It's a media company creating deep dive content on food tech and sustainability. So we take one topic at a time, and we really, really dig deep from all perspectives, covering the latest innovation, the regulation side, the investor's perspective, etc. We created one big season, 10 hours of content on cultured meat, then recently digged through the greenwashing within plastic alternatives and how food companies should actually package their products. And now the next season is going to be on how to communicate alternative proteins. So specifically what we're talking about right now, how do specifically cultured meat, for example, how do we need to use images, words, stories to make people open up to it? And how do we face the growing resistance and skepticism towards science and innovation? Now, to get into the first round, our first topic, alt protein regulation, a bit of input on that. In Brussels alone, there are 30,000 registered lobbyists, and the majority of them is from the food industry. When we're looking at technology and innovation history, which is my personal academic background, it's so clear that no innovation just comes in and is widely accepted by established players and consumers. There's lots of resistance, and we see that in the fields of solar energy, plastic packaging, and so many more examples. Most recently, we've also have been battling the Amendment 171, working on disallowing plant-based milks to be called creamy, to be called milk, to be packaged in the same packages as conventional milk. And I think Oatly is a fantastic player in the field, really working on spreading consumer awareness and pushing against this crazy regulation. So my first question to Janesh is, how concerned are you about the resistance of corporate players? Maybe you have also some examples from your background.
The quick higher level nutshell is it's worrying, but in the long term, I don't see this being a problem. That's not to trivialize the challenge that it creates for the industry. Obviously, it is real. But at the same time, I think, like you mentioned, any large systematic change and systemic change, especially in any industry, around the world, causes these kind of concerns. So yeah, I think there is a variety of ways, in my view, to sort of tackle this. One is literally just in a big way, consumer acceptance growing, and I know that's one of the topics we're likely to talk about today. But I mean, my take is, one is consumer acceptance, demand driving behavior, demand driving regulations. Governments take notice when large swathes of people want to buy a certain product, right? In India, for example, having a very personal experience with Amul, India's leading dairy company, really leading the charge against all kinds of alternative milks and soya milk and almond milk and oat milk and others, and talking about how dairy contributes 2% to the GDP, how it's such a big industry in India, the cow is considered holy. But I think a lot of this conversation really gets fueled because of information asymmetry, lack of awareness amongst people of really, with India in context specifically, there are cultural implications of what dairy is, of how the cow is looked upon. But I think on learning the truths, like when I just, in regular conversations with people, when I talk to them about India being the largest dairy consumer in the world, at the same time it being the largest or second largest exporter of beef and exporter of leather in the world, right? And quickly, you can like remove the cognitive dissonance in people by helping them connect the dots, right? So I think, one, it's going to be a lot of information and awareness sort of campaigns that need to happen outside of what mainstream media and lobbying-driven media sort of does. Two, I think Oatly's type of stance, of just mocking literally, this stuff, which is truly actually mock-worthy. And sort of trying to add a light side to it. Humor always gets to people, right? Like serious conversations may or may not get to a large number of people. Humor always gets to people, right? It makes them take notice, something controversial, right? And so what Oatly is trying to do, I think there needs to be more of sort of that approach being taken, like just like mocking this sort of nonsensical, appeal for regulation. And also, again, quoting from, the example of Oatly, where their packaging starting to show metrics, just numbers of, even if you change the names of things, for example, if you have to, unfortunately, if you're showing the climate impact, the greenhouse gas emissions, the water usage, et cetera, on the packaging, the average consumer who may or may not care about animal welfare, other such topics, may not relate food and meat to climate change, will still read these labels. And start, like, over time understanding, okay, what is my climate impact? What is my carbon impact, for example? and that will make them question stuff. So I think it's a multi-pronged effect. At the end of the day, well, I mean, given that I'm wearing that Just t-shirt today, Just is a classic example of the mayonnaise battle between Unilever and Hampton Creek. That's what it was called at the time. And we all know what eventually happened. It went through multiple rounds of bullying by Unilever, and eventually we all kind of know who came out on sort of the winning side and who withdrew the case. So I think it's also a lot of credit given to Just in this case, for example, or Oatly, for holding on, continuing sort of doing what they're doing, holding on to their beliefs, not getting easily bullied, and I think that combination of demand rising, consumer awareness, use humor, and continue to make amazing products with clarity, numbers, and metrics. Give transparency to customers, right? I'm sure there's a few other pieces, but these are the ones that sort of are top of mind, around the question.
Thank you for your perspective. Anybody who wants to comment on that directly?
Yes, I would like to jump in. Just building on what Jinesh just said, I believe there are other interesting factors as well. So, for example, I think that social media is helping a lot because the conversation on social media is hard to control. So people are talking about this and people are talking on multiple forums about this. There is a growing volume of information. People get together, people create forums to find products, to review products, to discuss solutions. It started as a very, very niche, small population interested in vegan, vegetarian foods, and now it's becoming mainstream. And I think that what Jinesh said, just many forces just strengthen themselves in a compounding effect. So, for example, the climate change is just becoming very obvious to everyone, and people are talking about this everywhere. So I think it's more and more. It's just hard for these the lobbyists to hide everything. It's becoming very clear.
And Rob, your camera was off when I wanted to ask you, but can you introduce yourself?
Yes, okay. So I'm Rob Bloom. I'm a co-founder and the CEO of the Leaf Protein Company. My background is in engineering. I'm an engineer turned finance investor, worked in private equity in Latin America in various fields, including food and agriculture for a while. And most recently, I migrated to Australia and started the company, the Leaf Protein Company, which has a very ambitious goal to disrupt the plant protein market, particularly soy, as the main source of plant protein in the market. We believe that with the growing consumer interest in plant-based foods and cell agriculture, there needs to be more options. There are only 4 plant protein ingredients in the market, and all of them that have problems such as allergens or still a high environmental impact. So we're developing an alternative solution made with leafy greens. So we're extracting protein from green leaves.
Okay, thank you, Rob. So regarding alt protein regulation, Vin, you have a company in the cultured field, and that's one of the more tricky topics to sell to consumers. What has been your experience regarding regulation and the reaction of people towards cultured meats?
Yeah, there's only one meat option available, cultured meat, currently at this point in time. That is the Just chicken bites. But the reaction has been pretty good in that sense, because one of the important things for us to do before this kind of product go into the market is we have to educate people about how the technology works, what and all we put inside the system when we are producing this, and we have to really show them how we actually do things. This kind of creates a lot of transparency, which is absolutely important, as Jinesh and Rob was mentioning. And that kind of snowballs into like people's other aspect of things. That is like, oh, how am I getting my current meat? What's its impact on climate? All these kind of things snowballs eventually, and governments will have to take notice. We are lucky in the sense that Singapore is very, very open to any new technology. and they are like even we are a very minuscule company, but even then we are so much engaged with the Singapore government just to make sure that they are also learning as we go about how to regulate this industry and all. And one of the advantage we have in Singapore is like we don't have too many corporate lobbying groups, but it can act as a very good template for other countries to learn and adapt this kind of model. That's a very big advantage we have in Singapore, and many countries are taking note and also following in the similar footsteps. And we are very open. Like we invite people left and right into our lab. Like, hey, come see what we are doing, even though it may not be as sexy as we've seen the food shows and all. But if you understand the fundamentals of how from a single cell we go to the meat products, people will, oh, this looks pretty normal. There is nothing like Franken or lab or any of this kind of weird names people have associated with a simple cultured meat. So that's one of the route we are taking in order to educate people and also keep governments in the loop, because eventually they are the one who's going to make sure that they have the whole ecosystem in place for educating people and helping people understand the technology and all. So we are a part of ecosystem, and it's important for us to keep in all other people also in the loop. So that's a route we are taking.
Anybody comments on that?
I'll just add, I would say that over the last 24 months, the doors has been kicked down and everyone's aware and readily accepting alternative protein. And we've seen that with the adoptance and awareness and really the day-to-day incorporation of plant alternative products in our business. And there is some sort of conversation that people are a little bit apprehensive when we start talking about cultured meat. But the reality is that that discussion is gaining full traction. But as Vin just said, the education remains paramount. We have to continue to educate not only the consumers, but the industry as well. I mean, when we start introducing any new vertical in the business, people that have assets, those that are producing or using machines to interact with animal protein, they're worried because their generational farm, their generational investment is going to be hurt and damaged. So the more we educate them, the less polarizing it will become. No matter what, it's going to remain polarization for some long time, right? That will exist. The question is, how do we go back and educate some of these farmers that, by simply harvesting something different, instead of maybe a cow, or instead of harvesting or interacting with 1 million cows a year, maybe it's only 500,000, and the other efforts that they're using, the other land can be used to develop pea, soy, or other products. So I think also that while we're introducing and supporting and advocating a new industry, it is so critically important to bring along that historical, really not only the industry, but the knowledge base with us, because the longer we let that lag and that gap exist, the more friction we will get. And we know that the old partnerships reside with the governments. So lobbyists are directly connected with them. So the faster we go directly to the source and to the root cause, I think they will eventually influence the lobbyists, because money is funneled directly from the original industry. And until we address that, we will continue to have friction within that ecosystem. Because remember, there are a lot of facilities today that are in the market that are underutilized. There's a lot of land out there that is being disrupted because of the soil nutrients. So the business case is out there. It's just who's going to elegantly map it out and educate the entire ecosystem that this is good for everyone and that working together is going to happen. But the lobbyists will continue to resist because they are only being funneled and engaged by the people that are out in the industry. And if they have very little information, they're going to continue to make those phone calls and send those letters because they just don't have the content. So I think what Vin said is absolutely right. Education and awareness is going to be massively important.
Can I just quickly add a 60-second, maybe 90-second comment on that? So, I think we should try to make regulation do what it's supposed to be doing, which is making the foods that we make safe. Nowadays, just like everybody on this panel is criticizing, is that big companies, conventional meat company, is using it against us. You cannot, like Vin cannot call the meat that he made a meat. how can that happen? How is that happening? I think, it's just like, nowadays we say we put everything on the cloud. The cloud is no more the thing above your head in the sky. The cloud could be something IoT, so we should move on. These terminology should not be regulated by the regulation. The regulation is supposed to be making sure that we're labeled correctly and our food is perfectly safe for people to consume. And that is just my 2 cents.
Yes, Janesh?
Hey, yeah, and quickly touching upon and building upon what panels talked about, cultured meat and acceptance. I've dabbled a little bit in the space, and lately I'm also helping lay the foundation for Counterfactual Ventures, which is a venture studio focused on the all-protein world. We're getting founders together, deciding, researching what companies to be built across cell-based, algae-based, fungi-based, and plant-based, and then eventually going to fund these companies and incubate them right across the world. Some of the thoughts while I was thinking through what are the cell-based companies to be built tomorrow, part of like we're deciding what are the right white spaces where there's both an impact and a business opportunity. A lot of research went into, of course, the cell-based side of things. A couple of points, I was just making a couple of quick notes. I'm going to try and read out of those. There's like leaders, like Vin mentioned, Singapore being a leader in this space, right? But part of it is sort of a forcing function. Singapore doesn't have enough land. And they source a lot of their food from outside, right? Even like the tap water comes from a different country, if I'm not wrong. The milk gets imported from Australia. It's fascinating how the country operates. But at the same time, they're clear that in the future they want, food independency, right? That they don't want to be dependent on other countries for their food. It is very similar in the Middle East. We have a lot of Middle Eastern countries, Saudi Arabia taking sort of a lead on exploring these sort of technologies as well. Israel is a big leader in this innovation where the government is getting involved. And I think these sort of forcing functions of uncertainty of the future and wanting to have food dependency, while not having a huge land, water, pollution and climate footprint at the same time, will drive more and more countries towards that brink. But I think Singapore, the Middle East, Israel taking lead on this, I think will give an example to other countries to sort of see what can be achieved in this space. And I think to add to this, in the cultured meat space, I think a lot of federal governments have already invested money. India was one of the first ones to put a grant out, I think in 2018, 2019 in this space. Japan's done that. China, of course, Israel. So there's a lot more starting to happen in terms of governments taking notice. So I think that's a good thing. Additionally, in terms of I think cultured meat sort of acceptance, there's a few things that can be done, which is talk about adjacent, industries. Talk about the biotech industry. It's not Frankenstein for someone's stem cells to be taken to their cartilage to be created outside their body so that they can get their cartilage in the knee replaced. Or in the future, in the very near future, your heart or your lungs or your organs being replaced, which are tailor-made for you off of the cells from you. So I think that reduces people's anxiety around looking at cultured meat in a way, right? There's also the fact that if you talk about, transparency, sustainability numbers tell how much more sustainable cultured meat is compared to regular meat. Doesn't have cholesterol, doesn't have antibiotics, doesn't have, hormones, all the other negative implications of regular meat. People are taking notice because they really care about what they're putting on their plate and their stomach now. People are starting to question this a lot around the world, irrespective of their dietary choices. Additionally, I think Jerry mentioned a good point about farmers, folks transitioning over, and I think a lot more work needs to be done in that space in terms of helping farmers, the current industry transition over to all protein, and even slowly cajoling, encouraging the big food companies, to continue investing in this space, making them see how this is sort of the future, which it's already happening. We just need to keep on sort of pushing that. Last 2 points to mention: celebrities, marketing, and branding always influences the masses around the world. People take notice. So, all the actors, celebrities, sports people starting to take to plant-based diets for efficient performance or investing in companies in this space are all starting to speak out. More of that needs to start happening. And the last piece is, exotic meats. If you tell someone, hey, probably going to be able to try mammoth meat in the future because of cell-based meat, right? I can see Vin smiling, right? So that's the kind of stuff, it gets people excited, right? It's like, what? Like, I'm going to have like kangaroo meat without killing a kangaroo? Like, okay, like I feel a little better about it now. Or like mammoth meat, or extinct animal. So I think there is ways to talk about this stuff as exciting, as something really good, rather than only trying to address the negatives in people's heads. Try and show them like the cool side of this as well.
So to talk a bit about the regulation and the corporate connection part, we have a bit of a tricky challenge here that we are running against time in terms of sustainability. So the faster we reach go-to-market and large scale with alternative protein solutions, the more impact we will have. And it's clear that corporate infrastructure is very helpful for that. And at the same time, also having corporates on board is important to avoid regulation against alternative proteins. But this is it's a delicate path to walk on between scaling fast and having corporates on board, and then not being bought out, or maybe just bought and then maybe discontinued. So how do you see the role of alternative protein companies in connection to corporates and in relation to regulation? Maybe Eugene, you have a point of, oh, Vin. Vin has something on that.
Eugene, go ahead. It's okay. I'll come back.
Well, I think most of the corporates that we're dealing with today, they are still really in murky water, so to speak, when it comes to alternative protein. So they may have all the talents, they may have all the scientists, but then again, how to get consumer accepted, which one are you going to launch it to the consumer, and how? I think a lot of these corporates are still not really understanding, not really having a full picture. Let's say, for example, what I remember Rob just mentioned about, there's only about 4 to 5 different kind of protein that we're eating if you're eating alternative protein. That's a bloody good point, is that to get more consumers accept alternative protein, plant meat, or even cell-based meat, you got to give consumers option. By that, I don't mean you come up with another beyond like plant-based burger or another impossible like plant-based burger, because that doesn't help. That to all the consumer, it is still made by soy. It is still made by pea. What the heck? What are so different than your protein and his protein and her protein? It is not that different. You really got to come to all the way back to the ingredient, to the sources of your protein. And that's what a lot of the people on this panel are working on, is that we're trying to go out of the way and get all kinds of different kind of protein. Like in our case, we're trying to get microalgae into people's diet. And this, as I can explain to you very, very boldly and very, very absolutely, is that none of the corporates are doing this. They are just riding on the innovation coming up by the startups. So the key people in charge of the innovation, they themselves are actually really afraid of innovation. So what I think should happen is that they should let us entrepreneurs run the game well to some extent. There's definitely a point that the corporate should take over. The corporate should come in and really scale up to the next level. But before that point happen, I think corporate should just be involved, putting money in, giving us access to the channels, be as nimble, as little as they can, but try to be helpful. And then in that way, I believe we can create really a wonderful ecosystem where a lot of true issues can be addressed by the innovative, by the clear-minded entrepreneurs, while the corporate do their jobs, make their money down the road. That, I think, should be the world that we should try to create.
Mm-hmm. Vin, what's your point on that?
So I think, as Eugene was mentioning, yes, pretty much most of the big corporates are still in undecided state, which direction to take. So that's a kind of good and bad thing, because good, they are not poaching all the companies. Bad thing because we definitely need the corporate support. How much ever we like to expand and become big, there is something known as know-how about doing things, which comes by experience and doing things on a long-term basis. And corporates have plenty of know-how of supply chain, or how to go to from factory to the supermarket and all. These kind of things which are like for startups, these are all very far off ideas. But if we can collaborate with corporates and make them understand this technology, it's an amazing win-win situation for us, human population, and for the earth. But if we can't strike a balance to help them understand this technology, up and coming technology and inevitable technology, if corporates are in the delusion that, oh, these kind of things are never going to fly, I think you can neglect them. But majority of the corporates are able to recognize few things because you can see the investment happening. Some of the biggest meat producers are actually the biggest investors as well. So they realize the force coming, but it's just like they don't know how to take part in it. So they are coming in the very traditional route, like, okay, let me put some money into some of these companies. So the best thing is if we can collaborate with big corporates, not just to take over the company and squish us, but to develop the technology. That will be a win-win for everyone. But if they are like not ready to accept that, I think then it's a bitter war, which it kind of helps us lose on the both ends. We will definitely come out much stronger, but it will take much longer for us to go to the market and things like that. So we can understand and accept each other's strength and weakness, play around with that goal. It will be much better for everyone. So that's what our proposition is for big corporates as well.
Rob, you wanted to say something?
Yes, very quickly, just to complement what you said, I think that I have a little bit of a different approach on this. I think it's there's two battles here. One is the R&D, the scalability, where the corporations, they are our partner. We need to work with them because they have all of the channels, they have all of the money, and they've been playing in this space for centuries now. So they know the clients, they have the relationships, so they can be very good allies for us. And they're changing. They realize that awareness is increasing, consumer behavior is changing very fast, so they are changing, as we're seeing, right? An example is JBS, all of the large corporations, they are all investing in alternative meats. But on the other hand, I think that the time frame is really short. We don't have the time, so we need to move fast. And this is a battle that we need to engage more. We are here. We are entrepreneurs. We're basically challenging the status quo. We are activists, and somehow, how can we change? We need to educate. We need to engage with people, and we need to engage with governments. So I think that it's very important to be bolder on this front and engage with the ecosystem and just really make an effort, because we need to put pressure on the society and the corporations on all fronts. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. It's 2021. We have 9 years now.
Thank you for your point on that. Janesh, what would you like to say to that?
Just adding a couple of things. I think my bottoms-up thinking with corporates starts with profitability. So I also serve as a principal at an entity called Bright Green Partners, headquartered in Berlin. We're focused on, one of the key things we're focused on there is really being a strategy boutique for entities like governments or big food companies who want to take a bite into the alt protein space or are like curious about it. Like all of them, like panelists before me said, they've taken notice, right? But at the core of it all, for the big food companies, it's profitability at the very core of it, and ensuring that their brand value lives and that they're able to keep up with times and show that they have a variety of products to serve, especially the big companies, to serve a large range of people, right? And if one can really start sourcing more and more market research information trends, not just again from celebrities, but across countries around the world, diets changing and stuff, and really how there are these products are not necessarily good alternative protein products, that these are just good products in general, right? Without any tag of alternative protein or vegan, these are good for people, that people like them. People like the nutrition, people like the taste, all the different climate change related aspects with it. I think that's one way to start creating some of that FOMO in them, right? Because they're also very equally, one thing people don't talk about, the big food companies, is just because a company is big, it doesn't mean they're just insulated to every wave of change in the world. This has happened across industries and tech companies, et cetera. So they're also afraid, right? We've got to remember, we also have leverage on the other side of the industry. We're not without leverage, just like small little entities fighting giant battles, or giant entities, and create FOMO. Like, tell them, if you don't do it, someone else will. And there are examples. Tyson, that's one example. Danone is an example. Epigamia, which is like a Chobani of India, has plant-based products, and a bunch of them coming out soon. That is an example. Amul, who is kind of, on the one hand, taking a stand against the labeling and stuff, actually has a bunch of dark chocolates and other things that are actually vegan but not labeled as such, right? So it's like a double-sided game some of these folks are playing. So they also have a finger on, they have a pulse of what's going on, right? So it's about pushing them the right way. And also, like we're trying to do at Bright Green, like trying to give them an easy way to doing it, right? Some of them just find it hard to transition. These are like giant ships are heading a certain way, and to change the direction of a giant ship takes a lot of energy and a lot of precision, et cetera, right? So if someone can come in, like there's these tow ships that come, small little ones in the front of giant cruises to kind of guide them in navigation and stuff. I think we can play that role in helping them explore this industry and help them understand how they can sort of really invest in the place in this space. Last but not least, talk about investment trends, just like the growing number of investments in the space. Large entities like Bill Gates, who are invested in traditional food companies like the Monsantos, for example, are also big on the alt protein space. So I think that itself, big investment trends happening around the world of people who traditionally never invested in food or alt protein. Some of the biggest television media industry folks in India, for example, and in other industries, they're starting to invest in this space. So I think that should be a good sign, just from a profitability ROI perspective for these folks, where even if they don't care about other things, they'll care about staying alive as a brand and being profitable.
Mm-hmm. Jerry?
Just to add a lot of good content here. I think as I just examine a lot of the conversations we're having today, what we're finding is that they're open to innovation. They're open to providing access to their labs, access to their suppliers. I think one of the key components that we're finding now is that they really need support to map out what the roadmap really is, how to really examine their entire asset class or asset base, and come back with them or to them with the solution to simply, literally to say, these are the pieces of the puzzle that you have today. These are the pieces that we've identified that can be injected, and this is how we can pull it all together. And here is really the overall thesis, right? So really mapping out the landscape, figuring out what the investment thesis is, and then what are the real actionable tools or implementation schemes that allow them to buy into it. Because the reality is, if we walk into a large organization and ask them, here's this cool innovation, here's what we want to do. Well, we're one of 100, one of 1,000. But very rarely does that group or that organization put themselves in that organization's shoes and really map that out. Now, granted, it's a lot more costly. It takes a little more time. But once we start talking about the things that they really care about, granted, we know that as well, everyone cares about bottom line. That's intuitive, right? We know that. But it's really saying, okay, look, we've mapped out your entire ecosystem today. If we took X% of your current infrastructure and redeployed it with X amount of capital, and we injected these additional 2 or 3 partners, then they're listening. But when we're simply talking about, hey, here's this cool project, here's what we're doing, you're one of a many. And let's be concrete, we're one of many. And so the only people that really differentiate themselves is people that really put themselves in that large organization's shoes and build out that roadmap and show what's the real return and how it's going to be done, not what and why the planet needs something better. Everyone knows that. It's just, okay, how do you move this big vessel that we're asking for agility that just hasn't done it? And I think those are some things that we're finding now, is that because they're willing to give you that facility for 6 months or even a year. They're willing to allocate machine time if in fact they understood how that really impacts. And I think that's one of the learnings that we've had, because like many times we approach large organizations and we realized we weren't necessarily getting the traction because we were just one of many, but they started listening once we started changing the conversation. I think that's really where it comes in. The second thing I'll add is it's really cool to have a great idea, but unless you're putting your own capital, it's not the same. And everyone comes in and said, look, I have this great idea. This is so cool. And then they turn around and say, well, how much have you invested? And how much of your own money have you invested? And most people say, oh, I put in sweat equity. Oh, look, let's be concrete. That's not very interesting. And so I think those are real conversations that are happening, right? I mean, by show of hands, how many people have been asked, how much equity have you put in? And then probably our first venture, we all said, oh yeah, but I'm working. I've been working in it full time. Yeah, well, line up with another million entrepreneurs to do the same thing, right? So I think those are key components to think about, guys, just from my perspective. So.
Well, we are approaching the end of the panel, and there have been many topics that we didn't get to touch upon. One side note, in the research during Red to Green on plastic alternatives, I think there are a lot of lessons to learn from how the plastic industry is boycotting sustainable solutions in the packaging space, and how much they are also spreading fake news and fake reports, fake studies. So lots to learn there. And what Janesh also pointed out, you could say they are a bit schizophrenic. So there is a report called Talking Trash, and it specifically points out how packaging manufacturers and plastics on the one side say, well, we are investing in sustainable options, and they are somewhat, even though it's a very small percentage of their actual revenue. And on the other hand, behind closed doors, they are pushing everything in terms of regulation to stop the progress of plastic alternatives and to keep them monopoly. So they are playing both cards to be well off in any case, push it down if possible, if not possible, buy it up. And it would be interesting to have your opinion on that if you have 10 more minutes, everybody. Good on your side? So anybody who wants to comment on the last points? Rob?
I can get started. So my comment is very short. I think this is very clear. It's quite, common behavior. If you get the big tobacco, the big oil, now the big meat. So a great example was this week in the city of Lyon in France. The Green Party, they had to withdraw from their plan to introduce just one day free meat, 1 day a week in schools. So basically this is happening everywhere, and this is something that to my point before, I think we need to be closer to the ecosystem, engage with. I think that GFI is doing a great work, and to spread the word, educate the population, because we need the population to choose, right? And the population is going to pressure their representatives and elect their representatives.
Thank you for your point. Now, to wrap it up, everybody, please take a maximum 1 minute. What is one takeaway or controversial opinion that we didn't get to talk about? Please keep it to one, maybe 1 or 2 sentences. Eugene, would you like to start?
Well, I would like to start with my usual comment on the options of alternative protein. That is the key reason why it is so hard to push for alternative protein. I guess to some extent, same with the alternative packaging, is that we need to create options. So if you're not vegans or vegetarians, you eat animal. There are about 4 or 5 species you can eat from the land, and there are possibly minimally 15 species you can eat from the ocean. If you're Japanese or you go to the sushi restaurant, then voila, there's possibly 20 more, even 30. So being a non-vegetarian, non-vegan, you are having a lot of options. That is not so fortunate for people like myself being a vegetarian, and even worse for vegan. So that's what we're all trying to do here. People are spoiled today. People are spoiled with all the options. if you have to lure consumers, we got to come up with better options. And that's what I believe all of us are trying to do.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Now, Jerry, you need to leave quite soon. What is your take on one controversial opinion?
Frankly, I haven't thought about a controversial opinion that we haven't discussed. We've touched a lot. I think rather than talk about a controversial opinion, I think what this panel has done is reinforce for myself that the need for organized conversations such as these platforms are massively important. Because we're all approaching a lot of the similar investors, a lot of the similar organizations. And the more aligned we are on we all know and recognize what the change has to be. The route to get there is slightly still in discussion, but we can all understand the resources, the asset classes that are all sitting idle or underutilized in the market. And I think the identification of those assets and then the reapplication of those assets, like we do with capital, is essential, because therefore we don't need to then ask for additional capex. We can limit the number of contributions we're looking for, and it's simply redeploying the asset class under the new reality. And I think that for me is something that it was an epiphany over the years. It continues to grow because these organizations simply need that type of guidance. They have the capital, they have the ambition. They just need a little bit of a new roadmap and people that are willing to put in the work behind it. So,
thank you very much, Jerry. Janesh, what is your point?
I'm going to wrap this up very quickly, make 2 or 3 points. First of all, Jerry, shameless plug. If you see any of the corporates who need some of the guidance around this, hit me up and Bright Green Partners. This is exactly what we're trying to do. I would love to partner with yourself and a wonderful set of other folks to work on some of that stuff. A couple of things very quickly that I'm rattling off. First of all, I want to see more and more people around the world who care about this topic to not just focus on activism through media or animal rights activism. That is great stuff. That in one case that's important, but from an objective perspective, people need other options. The industry needs to grow. Stuff needs to be more available. There needs to be more options, like Eugene mentioned, rightly so. So get in, become entrepreneurs. Take the dive. Doesn't matter what background you come from. I came from a Wall Street computer science and Silicon Valley background. What the hell did I know about the food space, right? So as long as you can combine profitability and impact, aim for that, not just impact with your business. Aim for building a really good business. Aim for tremendous profit. I want people in this industry to make trillions of dollars, honestly, and I don't think I feel shameful about saying that at all, right? I'd rather have this money go to people in this space. The other piece is, as people are building B2C companies, keep your eyes open for B2B opportunities. This will enable other players to jump into the space, other probably corporates or other smaller companies to jump into the space, probably create new revenue lines for you. So more and more B2B, building blocks of the ecosystem in the all protein, arena. I think those are just a few key things I just wanted to drop in here. And yes, Jared, more conversations around these. Maybe we should start doing more of some of this stuff, even on Clubhouse. And thank you to Foodeshow and Yuda and Marina for having us today on the panel.
Thank you. Vin, what's your point?
So during the evolution of any new industry, there's always going to be backlash. And in general, people are hesitant to change their tested habits. But education solves a lot of problems. So one of the things what we always encourage is, like, if you are in this area of Southeast Asia, like Singapore or Malaysia, do come down. We are very happy to talk to people and spread the message. You don't have to believe in whatever we say. Just see the things, understand, put some little time and effort into what kind of food you're eating, where is it produced, how is it produced. That will solve a lot of problems for yourself and also make better choices for you and your family and friends. So that's what we always encourage. Transparency helps a lot in educating people. Then you don't have to worry about the fake news or what not kind of attacks people make at you. So that will be much better solution rather than playing dirty. It's easy to play dirty all the time. That's a very easy option. But to go for we are here for a long run. We are not like, just make some profit and run away. If you want to really bring in some substantial changes to the way in which we live and source our protein and consume our proteins, learn a little bit about what you're putting. You have internet. You just Google it. You get everything out in your hand. So that's the advantage. Take some time, help us, and help yourself as well. That's our simple point.
Thank you. And lastly, Rob.
Yes, for my last point, it's not such a controversial point, but I want to make an invitation to everyone watching here to join us in this effort. A lot of people believe that food is very technical, that you need to understand all of the science behind. And I think it's quite the opposite. Food is very experimental, food is everywhere. So we can experiment and learn lots of things and find new solutions. And there are many layers on, researching and developing new foods. There is ingredients, of course, there is the basic science, there's food applications. Is a very broad area, and we're in need of people that have a passion for food, and people eat every day. So it's interesting how we find people that love so much food, and sometimes they just think that this is something that is they can't work in. And I can tell that I'm not a food engineer, and I've been working, and that it's been a great experience so far. So I would just like to invite everyone. And finally, thank you, Marina and Hilda, for having us.
Well, thank you all for joining the panel. I think my golden thread here was the role of engaging corporates and how we need to be all aligned and mindful in the way that we include corporates in the effort to avoid backlash or full-on confrontation. Have them as allies, not as enemies. And I guess we didn't talk that much about consumer acceptance. We went deep into corporates and regulation. So consumer acceptance is going to be the topic for the season that we have coming up at Red to Green. And shout out to anybody who may know experts who could talk about that. Please reach out to me on LinkedIn at Marina Schmidt. We are looking for experts in like academia, on cultured meat perception, on brand and marketing, on fake news and conspiracy theories, on regulation, on so many topics, consumer psychology, behavioral theory. And we really want to pool people from a diverse set of backgrounds to think about this specific topic. How do we make more people faster, sooner switch to alternative proteins away from conventional meat sources? So thank you all for being on this panel. It was a pleasure. And I hope we stay in touch and chat with the people who attend the panel and join in the discussion.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot. Thank you.